Gabriel Vieira had it all: money, power, influence. But even the brightest diamonds can feel heavy when worn alone for too long. Every gala, every red carpet event, he stood solo in a sea of couples, champagne glasses clinking in celebration of love, while he wore solitude like a tailored suit. They called him Eternal Bachelor with a smirk, but they never asked how it felt. Behind every empire lies a man who wonders what life would be like with someone waiting at home. This emotional story doesn't begin with love, it begins with fatigue. There's something strangely suffocating about always being seen, but never truly known. Gabriel wasn't looking for affection. He was looking for silence, freedom from whispers and side eyes that questioned his choices. It wasn't about finding love. It was about protecting his image from the scrutiny of tradition and the unforgiving standards of high society. He knew the expectations. A man like him should have a ring on his finger, a partner on his arm. But he only had headlines and a hollow laugh. So, when the invitation arrived, a rustic ranch gathering with his closest business partners and lifelong friends, he knew what was coming. Another weekend filled with cigars, wine, and subtle jabs disguised as friendly banter. That's when the idea struck like lightning. He wouldn't show up alone this time. For once, he'd walk in with a smile that wasn't followed by questions. He'd hire someone to play the part. Just an act. Nothing more. It wasn't as unusual as one might think. Celebrities fake dates for premieres. Politicians hire image consultants. So why couldn't a man like Gabriel orchestrate a touching story of companionship, even if it wasn't real? He called a discreet agency. Set the conditions. No strings, just appearances. A real story made to look convincing from the outside. And yet, he couldn't shake the feeling that this one would be different, somehow. The agency promised professionalism. No names exchanged until the moment they met. Discretion above all. It was business, pure and simple. Gabriel never expected emotion to enter the equation. He wasn't prepared for connection, only convenience. But sometimes, the most scripted moments end up revealing the deepest parts of us. Like actors who lose themselves in their roles. He had no idea that this facade would challenge everything he thought he knew about himself. As the days ticked by, he felt something unusual, a flutter in his chest. Anticipation? Curiosity? Or maybe, just maybe, a quiet hope he hadn't felt in years. Could pretending to have someone bring him closer to actually finding someone? He brushed the thought away. After all, this was just another calculated move. An image to be maintained, a spotlight to be deflected. Or is it something more? Behind the veil of his decision, life was already moving pieces he couldn't see. Because sometimes, what begins as a cover-up for loneliness becomes the very bridge to connection. And just as Gabriel tightened every detail of his plan, miles away, someone else was reading his ad, not knowing how much her own life was about to change. Emma Lacerda's world was far removed from the polished marble floors and chandeliers of Gabriel's universe. She lived in a small town where everyone knew your name, your heartbreaks, and your debt. Working long shifts as a nurse and caring for patients with warmth and grace, she had little time to dream beyond survival. When she saw the ad, seeking companion for public event, no intimacy required, generous compensation, her heart skipped a beat. Could this emotional story become her chance at freedom? She didn't recognize the man in the ad. There was no name, no photo, just requirements and a contact. Emma thought, what harm could it do? One night, a few smiles, and enough money to pull her out of the red. What she didn't know, what no one knew, was that the man behind the offer was the grandson of the patient she cared for every day. Mateo Vieira, a gentle soul with kind eyes and stories that sounded like fairy tales. Gabriel hadn't visited Mateo in years, not out of malice, but out of a painful avoidance. After the crash that claimed his parents, the old man was all that remained. And as guilt wrapped around Gabriel like chains, the visits stopped. Meanwhile, Emma became Mateo's sunshine, reading to him, cooking his favorite meals, and treating him not as a patient, but as family. It was a touching story Mateo often spoke of, the mysterious nurse who had somehow become his reason to smile again. Neither of them knew they were on a collision course orchestrated by fate. The agency handled everything as promised. No real names, no unnecessary communication. Emma, eager to escape her spiraling finances, applied without a second thought. And Gabriel, buried under deadlines and board meetings, never once considered who she might be beyond her performance. Somewhere between Emma's whispered prayers for a break and Gabriel's exhaustion with appearances, a quiet thread began to weave itself between them. A real story forming silently, unknowingly. What were the odds that two lives so different could already be connected by the man they both, in very different ways, cared for? Life doesn't ask permission to intertwine destinies. It simply moves. As the day of the event neared, Emma felt a mix of fear and hope. She practiced smiling in the mirror, borrowed a dress from a friend, and reminded herself she wasn't doing anything wrong. Gabriel, on the other end, kept his schedule airtight, determined to make this transaction as clean and unemotional as possible. Neither realized that reality was about to spill beyond the script. In the quiet gap between expectations and surprises, the most powerful stories are born. And while Gabriel planned a flawless appearance, Emma stepped unknowingly toward a moment that would blur the lines between role-playing and something deeply human. The ranch buzzed with activity. Guests in tailored blazers and elegant boots sipped cocktails under string lights and exchanged gossip like currency. Gabriel arrived with the sound of screeching tires and a cloud of dust, his signature entrance. People rolled their eyes, laughed politely, and muttered the usual lines. Still solo? Bet he brings a different client next time. Gabriel's jaw clenched. This time, they'd be eating their words. From behind dark sunglasses, he scanned the horizon for Emma. She was late. Again, appearances mattered, and being kept waiting was not part of the show. Frustrated, he waved her a quick message. Don't worry about the ride. Just come straight to the ranch. Then, with an exaggerated grin, he stood atop his truck's tailgate and announced to the crowd, "Today, you'll all meet my queen." That's when it happened. A sputtering sound broke the rhythm of the music. A beat-up VW Beetle chugged onto the gravel. Jaws tightened, eyes rolled. Gabriel himself winced. But then, the door opened, and out stepped Emma. She wore confidence like perfume, elegance stitched into every curve of her simple dress, and a smile so radiant it made the sun feel dull. The murmurs turned to silence. Gabriel watched, speechless. For the first time in years, he wasn't acting. She walked toward him, and for a second, he forgot the plan. As I said, he whispered with a smirk, looping his arm through hers, "Meet my queen." In that moment, everything shifted. The audience's laughter turned into awe. Emma had become something no one expected, a mystery wrapped in grace. It was no longer about appearances. The way she carried herself, the softness in her gaze, the quiet strength in her step, none of it could have been faked. She wasn't playing a role. She was simply being, and somehow it disarmed Gabriel more than any business deal ever had. An emotional story was unfolding before them, one that neither had written nor rehearsed. As guests came forward, Gabriel stood taller than ever, not because of pride, but because for once, someone beside him made him feel seen. And as the night pulled them further into its slow-burning magic, the crowd's interest faded into background noise. All he could see now was her, and all she could feel was the flutter of something dangerously close to real. Under the golden glow of string lights, Gabriel extended his hand. Emma hesitated, then placed hers gently in his. The music was slow, sultry, with a rhythm that dared them to lose themselves. As they moved across the dance floor, it felt less like acting and more like remembering. Each step, each gaze held a kind of familiarity, as if their bodies knew a story their minds hadn't caught up to yet. At first, they exchanged the usual pleasantries. But slowly, the space between words filled with something else, electricity, longing, unspoken truths. Emma's heart raced, not from nerves, but from something more terrifying, the thrill of being seen. Gabriel leaned closer and whispered something about her smile, lighting up the whole night. She laughed, genuinely, It wasn't part of the act. Then came a pause, a real one. Sitting down for a breath, they sipped wine and let their guards drop. Gabriel asked about her hometown, her work. She mentioned she was a nurse. He raised an eyebrow, amused. "My grandfather's nurse is from your town too," he chuckled. "Wouldn't it be wild if that was you?" The world seemed to freeze for a beat. Emma's face betrayed her for a second. She quickly shifted the subject, but Gabriel's curiosity had been sparked. Still, he didn't press. Instead, he let the moment pass, choosing to bask in the warmth of her presence. There was something about Emma that softened him, not with flattery, but with truth. The kind of truth you feel in the quiet pauses between laughs. The kind of truth that touches your chest before your mind can name it. For Emma, the lie burned quietly in her gut. She hadn't known it was Gabriel. She hadn't meant to deceive anyone. But now, knowing who he was, and that Matteo, her dear patient, was his blood, she felt like she was balancing on a blade. How could she tell him without shattering the fragile thing blooming between them? Yet even in the swirl of emotion and uncertainty, something beautiful had taken root. Gabriel, usually guarded, felt exposed in the best way. Emma, used to hiding her struggles, felt safe. This wasn't just a night of pretending anymore. It was a real story unfolding breath by breath, one that neither could have scripted, even if they tried. And as the music faded and they stood inches apart beneath the stars, the weight of what hadn't been said threatened to pull them under. But sometimes silence speaks louder than confessions, until the moment comes when truth knocks quietly in the dark. The party had ended, but the weight of the evening lingered. Gabriel offered to walk Emma to her car, a gesture that once would have been polite now felt personal. As they sat beneath the dim cabin light, the air thick with things unsaid, he turned to her, not as a CEO, but as a man longing for clarity. "Emma," he said softly, "are you the one caring for my grandfather?" Her breath caught. She couldn't lie. Not to him, not now. "Yes," she whispered, hands trembling in her lap. "I didn't know. I swear. The agency never told me who you were." Her voice cracked with sincerity. "I would never use him, Gabriel." His jaw tightened, eyes scanning her face for betrayal. Instead, he found fear. Fear of losing something she hadn't meant to find. Silence stretched between them like a canyon. He didn't yell. He didn't accuse. But his silence was louder than any outburst. Gabriel opened the door and stepped into the night, leaving Emma alone in the car, staring at the empty seat beside her. She didn't chase after him. She just watched as the man she had begun to care for vanished into the dark. That night, sleep never came. Gabriel tossed and turned, memories of Matteo mingling with Emma's laughter and tears. He wanted to believe her, but trust wasn't something he gave freely, especially not after years of people loving his status more than his soul. Still, her eyes haunted him, the way she looked when the truth cracked her open. Emma, meanwhile, questioned everything. Had she destroyed something real before it ever had a chance? The next morning, she returned to her routines, changing bedsheets, administering meds, smiling at Matteo. But the ache in her chest whispered of something unfinished. A touching story with no final page, only a comma. Sometimes it's not betrayal that breaks us, it's misalignment. Two hearts, both sincere, caught in the storm of coincidence and unspoken fears. But even when the path seems severed, life has a strange way of circling back to what truly matters. And fate, well, it wasn't done with them yet. The morning sun warmed the side of the small house where Matteo lived. Birds sang. A breeze carried the scent of fresh bread from the bakery down the street. Gabriel stood outside, heart pounding, unsure why his feet brought him there. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe it was longing. Or maybe, just maybe, he needed to know for himself who Emma really was when no one was watching. Through the window, he saw her. She was laughing, freely, deeply, with his grandfather, wiping soup from the corner of his mouth like it was the most natural thing in the world. She didn't know she was being seen, and that's what made it real. No performance, no act, just a woman being light in someone's world. Gabriel's eyes welled up, not from sadness, but from clarity. That moment shattered every wall he had built. This wasn't about betrayal. This was about truth, the kind that reveals itself when no one is looking. He turned, walked back to his car, and returned minutes later holding a bouquet, so large it barely fit through the door. When Emma opened it, she gasped. Roses, hundreds of them, spilled into the hallway. "I didn't come to apologize," Gabriel said. "I came because I saw you. The real you." Her hands trembled, lips parted in disbelief. Mateo chuckled in the background. "Took you long enough, boy." That's how it started. Not with grand declarations, but with 1,000 silent promises woven into petals and glances. This emotional story had found its way through detours and misunderstandings, proving that even the most complicated connections can become something beautiful. Sometimes we search the world for answers, only to realize they've been waiting in plain sight, at a window, in a laugh, in the hands of someone who was never pretending. And while their story had just begun, one thing was certain: it was no longer fiction. So tell me, have you ever felt like life was setting you up for something bigger, even when it seemed like a mistake? What would you do if someone you met by chance turned out to be the missing piece in your story? Would you walk away or take the risk? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to know what you would have done in Gabriel's shoes. And if this touching story moved you in any way, don't forget to like, subscribe, and tap the notification bell so you never miss a new chapter in our collection of emotional stories and real stories that might just be closer to your heart than you think.